It's been a week since the first presidential debate, and the fallout continues for President Biden. The president's performance has renewed calls for him to step down and allow a younger candidate to take his place. But the Biden campaign and top Democrats say there are no plans for the president to step down from the ticket. But will voters continue to stand by Biden? Former President Trump and his campaign took a victory lap following the debate, but received criticism for a number of false statements he made during the forum. This week, Trump received a victory in the Supreme Court's presidential immunity ruling, with the High Court ruling Trump can expect at least some level of immunity when it comes to his time in office, slowing down his criminal cases surrounding his handling of classified documents and election interference. Biden slammed the ruling in remarks on Monday, saying that the decision leaves virtually no limits on the presidency. So how does the Supreme Court's latest ruling impact the presidential election? Here to go on the record is Scott Tranter, Director of Data Science for Decision Desk HQ. Scott, it's always good to see you, and we have a lot to unpack in here, so I'm going to jump right into it. That Supreme Court ruling, it comes as the High Court has made a number of rulings recently. This latest one obviously found that Trump has at least some immunity for official acts, along with we've seen the court rule on rulings about abortion access and how prosecutors can charge January 6th defendants. Biden and Democrats are pushing back on a number of these decisions. You know, it's interesting, Scott, in 2016, you saw Republicans campaign heavily, and also in 2020, campaign heavily on the issue of the Supreme Court and appointing conservative justices. Do you think we could see Democrats, sort of flip that strategy so it suits them?
Yeah, no, I look, the backlash over the Supreme Court rulings yesterday among the Democratic Party seems to be pretty swift. And look, the Democratic approval ratings of the Supreme Court are way down over the last year. It is a partisan issue. It's something that they can motivate and certainly raise money and rile up the base on. That's for sure.
So in terms of rallying the base and maybe peeling off some independent swing voters, is this a galvanizing factor, and how do these decisions impact voter turnout?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. There's been a few turnout related questions in and around the Supreme Court, but the Supreme Court being a lightning rod for voter turnout is relatively a new phenomenon in the last 5 or 6 years. We can see some things in and around the overturn of Roe v. Wade. That certainly helped Democratic turnout over the last couple of years. We'll see if these rulings have the same effect. But just looking at the fundraising data in and around these rulings, in and around the Supreme Court, and what images the Democrats are using among fundraising emails is pretty telling that it is a motivating factor. Independents are a little bit more split. The data on the independents is still split. Half of them still have a pretty high approval rating. The other half don't. We'll see if something like this really moves it. But it's certainly a base type motivating factor.
I want to move towards the other top political story, which is last week's presidential debate. This was the first time Biden and Trump faced off in the 2024 cycle. Have we seen any major shift nationwide for voters, responding to the first debate? Obviously, Biden and Trump were both criticized, but it seems like Biden has gotten the brunt of the criticism surrounding the performance.
So just looking at the DDHQ Hill forecast and polling average, we've had about 9 polls as of about Monday post-debate. 7 of them are national, 2 of them are at the statewide. The national polls were not mixed, slight movement towards Trump, but we're going to have to see more so we can see a potentially 2 or 3 point move, but about a 1 point move towards Trump. And then we've had 2 statewide polls, one in Michigan that was favorable for Trump, and another one in New Hampshire that was very favorable for Trump. New Hampshire wasn't a battleground state a week ago, and the polling average indicates it might be going to the fall. The forecast still looking at all the different factors, still thinks New Hampshire's solidly in Biden's corner. I think these are the early indicators of some probably statewide polls we're going to see in the coming weeks that show a slight shift towards Trump.
Yeah, that New Hampshire poll certainly raised some eyebrows yesterday. But, during the debate, we know that a lot of voters were focused on President Biden's mental acuity, also on Trump's mental acuity. Biden's 81, Trump is in his late 70s, so this was a big issue. And a post-debate CBS YouGov poll shows that 72% of registered voters said they do not feel that Biden has the mental and cognitive health to serve as president. Scott, how alarming are these numbers for the Biden campaign?
They should be very alarming because you pointed the CBS YouGov poll. There was another Morning Consult poll that showed similar numbers, and this is not a new phenomenon. We've been talking about the polls and these types of questions for months now in the Biden as we lead up to this debate. This is something they've been tracking. This is not something they discovered post debate, and this is just another data point to show that the majority of voters. This isn't just a partisan issue. Majority of voters are worried about President Biden's mental and acuity fitness to be president.
I want to stick with that same CBS YouGov poll. When asked why President Biden shouldn't be running, 86% say it was because of his age. Now, the president has stated he isn't a young man anymore, but are his advisors and Democrats pushing him to show voters that his age shouldn't be a concern?
Yeah, that's certainly the narrative they're pushing post-debate. But it's a narrative they've been pushing for pretty much his entire presidency, and certainly as the campaign heats up, and the numbers are moving. You put up the 86% number again. There's lots of polls that support that or support that trend and show similar things. It's a strategy they're trying. It does not appear to be working.
So Democrats are saying there is no way Biden will step aside this election. But hypothetically, if there was a chance Vice President Kamala Harris took over the ticket, how does the vice president poll nationwide?
So at the Hill DDHQ polling average, we just put one up yesterday, and it's interesting from a head-to-head standpoint. VP Harris is behind Donald Trump, very similar to where Joe Biden is today. She's a little bit more behind Joe Biden. I think the advantage for her is it's a fresh slate. She doesn't come in with the initial questions about her age that Joe Biden does. She comes in with some questions about her favorability and her electability, but it's something that she can campaign vigorously on. I'm not quite sure she's going to be the shot to the ticket if she's at the top that the Democrats think, but the upside for her is she's going to have 5 months to campaign if they decide to move her to the top.
Yeah, and she automatically gets access to that money the Biden campaign has raised, something that some of these other potential floated replacements in a hypothetical scenario probably wouldn't get. So back to Biden's age and the debate performance, it's interesting because down ballot Republicans are already seeking to tie their Democratic counterparts to Biden's performance. It's interesting, the Senate Republican campaign arm put out a clip of Pennsylvania Senator Bob Casey and Montana Senator Sherrod Brown, essentially saying they have faith in the president's ability to do the job and that he, as Tester said it, is 100% with it. Do you think the strategy for Republicans works for Democrats who are running their own races in their own states?
Yeah, no, it's the other Democrat supporting Joe Biden is John Fetterman, with which everyone should go look up some of his latest tweets on that. Probably not good for this show, but it's a strategy they're trying. It'll be interesting to see if some of this sticks. I've seen a little bit of the messaging that you pointed out. The NRC is also playing around with saying, hey, these Democratic senators and congressmen knew. And they should have told us, and they shouldn't be sticking by him. We'll see if that sticks. I don't know that voters are gonna blame that too much. But look, in campaigns, you never want to talk about anything other than your issue, and this is forcing some of the Democratic senators in some of these battleground states to talk about something they don't want to talk about, even if it's not their fault.
So I want to go back to the horse race and take a closer look at Decision Desk's forecast comparing a number of battleground states. Trump has continued to lead in most swing state polls, but Biden seems to have made some movement recently. What are the president's chances at winning, Michigan? We've heard a lot about battleground Michigan. That's been a big focal point for the coverage surrounding the president.
Yeah, so Prior to the debate, Joe Biden was a mid-50s favorite to win Michigan, probability wise. Post-debate, it's ticked down a few points. It's just over 50% probability wise. That's probably his best upper Midwest state of the trio states. He must win to be reelected. Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania are those three. Joe Biden's not doing as well in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin right now, but Michigan seems to be his glimmer of hope, and we'll see if that holds out because I think we're going to see some new Michigan polls in the next week or so. And again, it's been in the news. Governor Gretchen Whitmer apparently said that it was not winnable after the debate. I don't know that she was looking at any private polling we haven't seen already, but it's certainly a state everyone's looking at.
Right. And another state everyone is looking at is Nevada, obviously a very important Senate race there and also a presidential swing state. What's Decision Desk forecasting there?
So right now it is slightly favored for Joe Biden. Again, that one's been going back and forth over the last month or so. Ever since Donald Trump did a pretty famous rally there a couple weeks ago where he said he was going to remove taxes for tipped workers, and Nevada's got a lot of tipped workers in and around the Las Vegas area. So and again, that is going to be one of those canary in the coal mine states for Donald Trump as he comes out of the debate. If he starts, pulling away and taking the lead in states like Nevada, Arizona, New Hampshire, as we talked about earlier, those types of things, those are the states that are going to start freeing up and potentially make this a landslide in a post-debate world.
Yeah, I look at the hospitality industry, particularly in Las Vegas, and the power of the culinary union, which has historically supported Democrats. So any lead for Trump there would be remarkable. So I want to switch gears and move to another big political story this week. Steve Bannon reported to prison to serve out a 4-month sentence for contempt of Congress. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene was standing in front of the prison with Bannon voicing support for what type of political influence does former President Trump's advisor still have from prison?
The Steve Bannon thing is interesting to me. We've seen a little bit of polling on him in the Republican Party, and with the exception of maybe 5 to 10% of the very hardcore Republican Party, most people don't know who he is or really care for that matter. He certainly is very influential and mentioned quite a bit in and around the president's circle. He said, to be quite frank, he said some pretty crazy stuff. It's one of those things. He's a newsmaker, but I'm not quite sure how he's going to affect the electorate. But it does appear he's going to be in and around any potential Trump White House.
Yeah, he's certainly a focal point for the Trump and America First MAGA movement. Moving to the progressive side of the aisle, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is attacking AIPAC after it spent millions of dollars in New York to oust fellow Progressive Squad member Jamal Bowman. The congressman had been very vocal about his stance on Israel. Are there any other progressive members of the Squad in Congress who could face the same fate? As I understand it, Cori Bush is up next for her primary.
Yeah, and that's the one we're looking at coming in August. Is Cori Bush represents St. Louis. Won a pretty bruising primary a few cycles ago herself. She's had some other scandals in her congressional term the last couple of years as well. She's facing a tough primary, and it's another target of as AOC has pointed out, the AIPAC crowd and the pro-Israel crowd. We're looking for a pretty close one there in a month, that's for sure.
Well, Scott Tranter, thank you so much for joining us to break it down as always.
Thanks for having me.